Dan Boles is an attorney, a father, a husband, and now he wants to represent the citizens of James Island on James Island Town Council. I sit down exclusively with Dan for a special edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and download my free Quintin's Close-Ups app in your Apple or Google Play stores. Dan Boles, welcome to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Thank you for having me, Quintin.
I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you're a local attorney here in town, but now you're one of the candidates for James Island Town Council.
That's right.
Describe Dan Boles these days.
These days, what am I up to? I've got a daughter. She's about a year and a half old. We live on James Island, obviously. My wife, Stephanie, and I, and we're expecting a son in February.
Congratulations.
Thanks. We enjoy beekeeping. We have a couple of chickens in the backyard and a dog. But these days, really, all I've been up to is campaigning, and focusing on November the 5th.
Speaking of which, I went over to your website and you talked about the following issues, including this development. You said this quote, "It's time for the city to accept that this is our island. I want it to be in good shape when my kids grow up. Currently, it seems like every last inch of the island is either in development or being slated for future development." But tell me this, Dan, how much is left as far as land on James Island in your mind?
That's a great question, because it has been said several times that the town of James Island is fully developed. And it's important to understand what that means is the town is a small subset of the island, okay? And the town itself is composed entirely of neighborhoods and businesses and some commercial areas. But the municipal boundaries of the town, I don't think are facing an immediate threat from being built on, because they are already. However, the island itself has property that is controlled by the town, by the city of Charleston, and by the county of Charleston, because there's unincorporated areas.
Right.
So when I speak about unchecked development, what I'm talking about are those areas outside of the municipal boundaries that are still on the island. And one of the things I would hope to do on council is extend our influence beyond the municipal boundary. Okay, for instance, if there is high density development to be slated in an area outside of our boundaries, we really need to be able to find ways to get our partners at the city and the county to respect our wishes about what happens with that land. One of the most important reasons behind that is that things like floodwater,
right,
power outages, sure, sewer lines, the streets and sidewalks, they don't follow municipal boundaries. They don't care where the city or the town or the county is. Water, power outages, and the things I mentioned cross municipal boundaries. And so this is one of the main issues I think is facing the town. I feel like I did a very lawyerly way of answering your question, which was to redefine it and then give it my own answer. But
I'm gonna get back to you being a lawyer.
That's what I mean by working to keep James Island, green for future generations, like my kids.
Yes, indeed. What is, in your mind, the relationship between the town of James Island, the city of Charleston, and of course Charleston County government?
The relationship between the three. I would say that the town represents the spirit of the island. The city represents some of the past, okay, of the island.
Okay.
And the county has just, it's kind of the umbrella or the catch-all for the parts of the island that don't fit right now into those two things. Now, caveat to that statement is there are some unincorporated parts of the island, right, like the Soul Agree area, Grimble Road, right, area. I think there's parts of Riverland Terrace, sure, that are unincorporated. Those areas, to me, do embody kind of the spirit of James Island, and I would like for them to have the opportunity to join the town. I would like for anyone on the island to be able to join the town. My understanding is there's some legal framework that has to be perhaps reworked or restructured in order for people to do that, but that's kind of how I see the three-headed monster, I call it, if you will, of James Island, being the city, the town, and the county.
And when you talk all about that, obviously there's the James Island Public Service District. And I want to talk to you about something that's been controversial lately, especially on Facebook. Obviously, many people talk about the cost-sharing agreement with the James Island Public Service District. And I'm wondering, does the tax credit reduces the amount of property tax for the average town homeowner in your mind?
That's a great question. People will say that there are no property taxes paid by James Island, town of James Island residents. Other people will say, well, it's actually that there are taxes levied, but they have been, because of the credit that you're talking about, effectively reduced to zero. Which begs the question, if they're offsetting each other, why do we even have them? Right? If you're going to create a tax that's just going to be then credited back to you, isn't there a way perhaps that we can just get the credit without the tax? That would result in some sort of net gain to town residents. I'm sorry to
no worries, go for it.
Keep you there. I am always in favor of tax credits. I'm always in favor of being able to bring back to residents, almost like shareholders, of a company. I'm always in favor of being able to bring back to them benefits and lower their taxes. In your specific example, my research indicates that the credit and the tax just kind of offset each other. So I think I've probably repeated myself here to say that because they offset each other, like they may not be necessary, or perhaps there's a way going forward, to improve that situation for residents, for town residents.
For town residents. Well, then, how much was the net result of a typical homeowner's tax break in your mind?
Okay. So a good buddy of mine, Trey King, asked this question on Facebook. And it's not my understanding is it is not a flat amount. It's a ratio of the value of your property.
Okay.
Okay. And on the town of James Island website, you can go read the minutes that lay out the equation, and you can figure out per property or per value of property what the rebate would be. I will confess I haven't memorized the equation, but on a limb, I think it's on the order. If you had a $300,000 property, it might be on the order of several $100s annually. But I would have to say I defer to whatever the formula is. And I keep talking over you. It's a really important question that you just asked, right? What is if I were a homeowner on James Island, shouldn't I be able to kind of rattle off what that is? That to me speaks a little bit to the transparency issue that I've raised and that I want to run on. It is on the minutes. You can, if you know how, you can go search these things out.
True.
However, to me, transparency means perhaps being a little bit more or presenting a little bit more, making it a little bit easier for people to know these things, so that if you and I wanted, we could pull out our phone and very quickly find the equation for what would be a $300,000 property owner or a $400,000 property owner's expected rebate. And so if I get to council, that's one of the other things I like to work on, not only the great benefits and things coming back to the residents, but also just making information easy to find and readily available to anyone that wants it.
Well, then, let me ask you this. Okay, these people are supposed to be getting all of this tax credit, but I'm wondering this. How much did the town of James Allen get on the back end of this as far as, money?
How much is the town
I should say
recovering?
net revenues, I'm sorry. That's what I should say.
How much is the town recovering? You mean to the municipal coffers, so to speak?
Yeah, with
recovering from the rebates from the public service,
property tax cuts and all that stuff.
Again, it's a great question, and it speaks to the issue of transparency, right? How do we readily find that out? I guarantee you, there are minutes from town council meetings that we can parse through that will answer your question. To me, this is something also, though, that council or the administrators could just parse and even promote. If it's a really great thing, you would want to put it out there and promote it almost like a headline for everyone, rather than bury it in minutes that we need to go through to find the answer. That's another lawyerly response and a way of saying, I don't know the true answer to your question.
No worries. And then another topic, too, is Senate Bill 669, obviously Senator Chip Campson's bill, and ensures that anyone who's serviced by the James Allen Public Service District would be allowed to opt into James Allen. Obviously, you are a lawyer. Let me ask you this. Is this bill unconstitutional in your mind?
Is it unconstitutional? So the Supreme Court of South Carolina will ultimately, or could ultimately, rule on that if it were challenged. If it were first passed, acted on, then challenged, it could go to the Supreme Court of South Carolina. As a lawyer, do I think it's unconstitutional? I hope for James Island's purposes that it is not. If you look at the language of the bill, which mirrors the House bill that Mr. McCoy sponsored,
Peter McCoy.
And I think after a little while was able to get through there. If you look at the language of it, there are some preamble language that establishes the reasons behind it, which is very important for South Carolina legislative purposes, because to a court that reviews a bill like that, or a law, such as the Supreme Court, they're able to understand the foundation of the bill, the desire and the purposes behind the bill. South Carolina doesn't keep legislative history like some other states do. So sometimes laws are passed that don't have an explanation as to the background or the driving force. And that's really important that we provided that in the bill. So if it were reviewed, that preamble that states because people who live within a public service district, I'm paraphrasing here, but if you live within the same public service district or special purpose district rather, and you are closer to the town hall and you want to be able to govern yourself, you should be able to get into that. They're trying to redefine contiguousness, which has always been the magic word for town building. And again, I gave you another long answer, but it's a way of saying I hope that it is proper, and by my reading of it, it has every chance of being constitutional.
Now, you talked earlier about people being in and out of the town. It brings me to another question, and you talked about Grimble Road earlier. How many properties have been annexed off of Grimble Road and other locations on James Island, that is, in your mind?
And when you say annex, you mean brought into the town of James Island or into the city?
Into the city, I believe.
Into the city of Charleston?
Yes, sir.
How many properties have been annexed from Grimble Road to there? I know off the top of my head. Here's how you can tell in person. Go drive Grimble Road. Yeah. If it's a single-family home, it's probably unincorporated. If it is a high-density, brand-new, brightly colored apartment complex or condo subdivision, it's probably been annexed into the city. I know off the top of my head on the as you go down Grimble Road towards Folly Road,
Right.
and you approach it on the left, there's some apartments or condos right there, which I believe would be in the city. All of the, I've got some friends over that way. They probably don't want me to say their name on here right now, but my friends over on Grimble Road, in case this ever gets back to them, but the people that I know on Grimble Road are all in unincorporated county, and they have single family homes. And so I don't know the exact head count of how many parcels the city has taken. I'll tell you this: it's over there. It's green. There are big parcels, so I know everyone's probably looking at it, some with the desire of acquiring it so that they can do something with it, and others of us with fear that those folks are going to get a hold of it. And again, that kind of brings me back to the hope that Soul Agree, Grimble Road, and the more folly word parts of James Island someday could opt into the town if they like.
Like, let me turn to public safety. You said this on your website too, quote, "My neighbors have too frequently posted home security footage of their cars and front doors being tested or broken into by thieves. It's persistent and we need to put a stop to it. I've sent Freedom of Information Acts to the Charleston County Sheriff's Office for all reported crimes in the last 6 months for zip code 29412. Let me ask you this. How many cameras should this town of James Island purchase for those particular areas?
Like public safety cameras.
Yes, sir.
Well, if Nextdoor app is any indicator of how many private cameras there are on James Island, then the answer is none. Because from what I can tell, every square foot of James Island in the neighborhoods is captured by someone's front door camera. Is it as a town, does it work to the benefit of the residents to have public safety cameras? That's the first I've ever heard that question. Off the top of my head, I'm a big fan of traffic cameras.
Nope.
They can catch accidents. They can show congestion.
Sure.
A lot of studies can be done with traffic cameras. I think they can be really beneficial. But in the context of break-ins and things like that, I wouldn't view public safety cameras necessarily as a deterrent or a helpful measure against the break-ins. I think what probably would help is this. It's also very often said by my neighbors that whenever Island Sheriff's Patrol has been able to catch somebody, they take them to jail. They are charged with a relatively low-level offense, and then, they aren't really punished for it, or it just nothing really happens, and then that same person gets out and comes back and does it again. Okay, what I would submit that we need to do when someone who has been doing this too frequently is caught, we need someone to go to the solicitor who has that case and let them know that this is not just another petty break-in. This perhaps is a person who has been doing it a lot, and the neighbors care about that. The solicitor holds an elected office, and so she is beholden to voters, and we are all voters for her or in her district. So I think what really would make a difference is follow-up. Okay, when the sheriff's deputies who work on our island make an arrest, it's out of their hands. That again we're not confined by the municipal boundaries. It doesn't mean that we can't reach out to the solicitors and let them know that perhaps we need maybe a precedent set, so that before somebody does something like that again, they may think twice. A deterrent, if you will.
And let me get to James Island Town Council. When you look at the relationship between the mayor and town council, what do you see?
The mayor of James Island and town council of James Island. It's an interesting dynamic down there right now. whenever something is passed, there's 5 votes.
Right.
It takes 3 council members to overcome something that the mayor may be in favor of. And I think that we have what's described as a strong mayor system on James Island. From what I can tell, everyone down there tries to behave professionally. I can say this with 100% certainty. They all really seem to care, and they all really seem to believe what they're doing is right. That said, believing what you're doing is right or having really great intentions doesn't always yield the best results. And that's one of the reasons why I've asked town residents to consider letting me work on council. Is I care just as much as these folks do, and my approach might be a little bit different, and I think it could yield some positive results.
Dan Boles, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for fixing my collar a couple of months ago. I still got it on camera. I'll show you the video later on, but thank you for this interview, and good luck to you.
Quintin, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Anytime.
All right.
Yes, sir.